All right, so let's go ahead and write an equation for the following function graph below. So we have an equation of some sort of graph. It can be secant or cosecant. And now we want to be able to find the equation of the graph. All right, so now if you remember, one of the things that you might want to consider doing is that you might either want to choose either secant or cosecant. So y is equal to a cosecant. B, I'm going to write it like this, x minus c plus d. Or you might want to choose using secant. B, x minus c plus d. All right. Now, one thing that you might want to consider doing is perhaps making this into a sine or cosine graph. Okay, so you can see that these are all basically little bumps. Okay, so you have zeros along these graphs. So let's first start off by figuring out where exactly the midpoint is. So, or the midline. Okay, we know that there's either going to be a sine or a cosine somewhere in the middle. So you can see here, my lowest value is -1, and my highest value is 4. So what would be midway between both of them? So midway would be 2, right? Because it's a 6. This would be 4. Midway would be around 2. So here is the midline. This is the midline. Okay. So if we think about it, in the midline, this is where at every asymptote it's crossing 0. So wherever I go to an asymptote, right, you're going to kind of have these zeros in here. It's kind of like that. So at every asymptote. Okay. And now you can see that these guys are all going to be opposite of each other. So we kind of take a look at this. Oh. Ah! Okay, that was sad. Okay, and so you kind of get the point. So this is going to be really useful, okay? Because technically what I'm doing is I'm graphing either the sine or the cosine curve. All right. So now, because I found the midline, which was y equals d, right? Or y equals 2. That's what d is equal to. So you already know what d is. D is equal to 2. Okay, it was shifted, everything was shifted up 2 units. All right, now notice we can figure out what our amplitude is. So how far is it from the midline upward? So if this is 2, it went up to 5. That means it must have been up 3 units. So a in this case is equal to 3 units. Okay, now we want to be able to grab a piece of this particular function. So one of the things that I think I probably will just use, I'm going to go ahead and use part of this graph. So I'm going to use maybe a cosine. I think a cosine might actually be really nice if I use. So I'm going to go ahead and use from this part to this part. So I'm going to ignore the other parts. Okay, so I'm going to ignore all of this. Okay. I'm going to ignore all that. So this is one period of the cosine curve. So first I'm going to get the cosine curve. Again, I could have chosen a sine curve if I wanted to. I could have chosen a secant curve, a cosecant curve. Doesn't really matter. You could have chosen anything that you like. All the numbers are pretty nice. All right, so I'm just going to use cosine for no apparent reason. So using cosine, let's go ahead and figure out what exactly is happening here. So for one thing, I can take a look at my period, b. So my period is equal to 2 pi over b. If I take a look at when does it complete one cycle, so it completes one cycle from this guy, which is about -1.5, all the way to 0.5. So how far is that? So 0.5 minus -1.5, that gives me 2. Okay, so that basically means that it'll complete, the period itself is equal to 2. So let's figure out what b is. So you get 2 pi equals b times 2. So b in this case is equal to pi. All right, so pi b will equal to pi. And now let's look at the phase shift. So how far did it go travel? So notice the cosine curve always starts at the origin. Cosine, remember it always starts at the origin. But it seems that it was shifted over to the left this way. If I'm shifting it over to the left, that means that this inside part was going to be positive. So it got shifted how many units over? So it seems like it got shifted over 1.5 units over. So about 3/2. Got shifted 3/2 units over. Okay, and I'm shifting it over to the left, so I'm going to write negative. So again, this was the cosine curve, right? So we have y is equal to the cosine, right? So a cosine bx minus c plus d. So a was equal to 3. We got the cosine. B in this case is pi. X minus c, which is a positive 3/2, plus d, which is going to be a 2. So because everything is swapped, this is going to be the secant of it. So y equals 3 secant. Let me go ahead and FOIL this. Pi x plus 3 pi over 2 plus 2. So this guy would be the equation of this particular function. Now notice I could have chosen another piece. I could have just easily said, oh, well, I'm just going to choose this piece now. You could have also done that as well and changed it up a little bit. Okay, so that instead you can use a cosecant graph. Okay, so either or, it would still give you the same exact answer.